Hello to everyone. We're just holding for one more minute to see if we have a couple more council members who can join us. We'll be starting momentarily. All right. Very good. So my name is Seifu, Reverend Seifu, and I'm the Executive Director of SDI. And I see we have over 100 participants already, and that number seems to be growing very quickly. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for making the time in your days from wherever you're logging in to join myself and the Coordinating Council of SDI for this State of the SDI World address. And so I'd like to start by asking all of the council members to introduce themselves in turn. And I'm going to call on Cynthia Bailey-Mans, who is our council chair, to begin.
Hi, I'm Cynthia, and the council chair is Seifu was saying, and very happy to be here with you today. Welcome.
Leslie. Okay. Sorry, Leslie, I was going to invite you to say a few words. I should clarify, just say a little bit about yourself to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm Leslie Keener. I'm a sister of Divine Providence of Kentucky, and I direct a ministry called God's Face, and I hail from Cincinnati, Ohio. I've been on the Coordinating Council for 2 years now.
Thank you. Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Lundy, and I am from Michigan, USA. Spiritual director in private practice, spiritual companion, and also the co-founder, co-director of a formation program called the Spiritual Guidance Training Institute. And I came on the council last July, and what a pleasure. And thank you for allowing me the privilege of being on the council and serving you all.
Thank you, Jan. And Wendy Bernstein-Lash.
Hello, I'm Wendy Bernstein-Lash. I have been on the Coordinating Council. This is the end of my 6th year, and you'll hear more from me later, but I'm Jewish and I live in California in Redwood City, and I have a private spiritual direction, spiritual guidance practice and supervision and meditation and mentoring.
And Eric Masanari.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I live in Newton, Kansas, which is in the south central part of Kansas. And here I work, where I am right now is on a campus of a long-term care center where I serve as a chaplain. And then I also have a private spiritual direction practice in the community as well. And I too am very grateful for this opportunity to serve on the council, and I'm wrapping up my 2nd year.
Thank you, Eric. And we have 2 more council members who unfortunately couldn't join us. Sean Murphy from Taos, New Mexico, and Bernadette Miles, who lives in Australia. And I'm sure they're with us in spirit, and so we welcome them as well. So to lead us off, Wendy's going to start a brief moment of meditation, reflection. So go ahead, Wendy.
So I invite us to simply find our breath And notice in the body the receiving of the breath and the releasing of the breath. And imagining with each breath, bringing ourselves to a little bit more stillness and deepening our presence here. And with each exhale, cultivating the connection of spiritual guides and companions and directors who are with us here today, and those who will be with us as they watch the recording. Breathing in and feeling the breath rejuvenating and enlivening our bodies. Breathing out and releasing into the collective connection. A few moments to notice where you are. And bringing the breath more fully with a deep breath into the body and letting it go. And reminding ourselves of the fuller community that we are part of here today and what will unfold.
Thank you, Wendy, and thankfully Bernie from Australia was able to join us as well. So welcome, Bernie. And if you want to say a few quick words about yourself, we can begin the program after that.
Thank you. Sorry, I had trouble connecting, probably because I'm so far away. I'm Bernie Miles from Melbourne, Australia. I've been on the council now for 3 years. It's a great privilege to be part of this really extraordinary ministry. I train spiritual directors and give spiritual direction and supervision here. Yeah, so it's great to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. So just a few words about the format of our town hall today. I'm going to be giving a presentation. I'll be sharing my screen here in a few moments. And then what we're hoping for is a question and answer dialogue. I'm a Socratic, and I'd love to engage with all of the questions. There's been a question about how many people are online, and I see about 150 of you between Zoom and YouTube, which is great. So welcome again to all of you. So after my presentation, we'll do questions and answers, and then Cynthia will share some thoughts, and we will conclude with Wendy. So the first thing is then this presentation. So I will share my screen, and hopefully everything works as it's meant to. You never know these days, but can you all see my screen?
It says you've started screen sharing, but it is black. So it might just be a little lag.
Thank you. While you bear with me while I.
We have it now, Seifu.
You have it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there is. I used to work at Microsoft, so I'm not super keen on PowerPoint, but I occasionally revert to it. So let's see again. Let's try this again. Here we go. Okay, so state of SDI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about various member demographics. I'm going to talk a little bit about SDI's finances, our programs, various growth that we're experiencing, some issues that we're experiencing, just to try to give everyone the lay of the land, certainly from my perspective, and to give you the opportunity to ask questions and engage in dialogue with me for a few minutes about SDI. And of course, any questions are good questions. So if you have something that you don't see that you'd like to inquire about, that's perfectly fine as well. There'll be two ways for you to ask questions: the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, Zoom screen, or the chat function, and I'll check both of those for questions. If you're on YouTube, you are spectators. So a little bit about our membership and the range of ages. You can see in this chart that we are still a predominantly baby boomer-ish organization. 89% of all our members are between the ages of 50 and 80, which tracks well with the notion that for most spiritual companions and most spiritual directors, that phenomenon is a second half of life.
Excuse me, Seifu.
Yep.
The chart isn't showing. What we're seeing is the initial slide. We're not seeing any chart.
You're not seeing members' age range?
No, we're seeing the state of SDI June 18, 2020.
Okay, then what's showing on my screen and what's showing on
I think maybe you're sharing something different than what, there it's coming, members' age range, okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to do it this way because when I go full screen, it doesn't.
Okay,
doesn't
yeah, there
like
were
it.
just people noticing it in the chat as well, so thank you.
Okay, so this is not the ideal display, but at least you can see what I've got. So 89% of our members are between the ages of 50 and 80, as you can see from this chart, I hope. And there's been some downward trend. Our average age is, as you can see, about 65, 66. It's down from 68, 69 years a few years ago. And we have an influx of younger folks stretching down to about age 35. Very few before that, though that is a constituency that we've been cultivating as well. So that is our age range. Then by gender, you'll see that we are about 80% female and 20% male, 78.7% and 21.2%. We have a gender fluid category that we're tracking now, which is 0.1%. That's a change from 4 years ago when I started at SDI, where the male membership was much, much lower in the single digits. So there's been a steady evolution. We're getting younger and we're getting a little better balanced between male and female in particular as time goes along. We are Spiritual Directors International, or I should say we are aspirationally Spiritual Directors International. Most of our membership is spread over 3 countries, 3 English-speaking, predominantly English-speaking countries, the USA, Canada, and Australia. And if you'll see from the map there, that's over 97% of our members are in those 3 countries, vast majority in the US and Canada. And so that's one of the areas that I would love to speak about, which is our international outreach, ambitions, and hopes for the future. And so I'll share a little more about that a while later. This is areas of expertise as reported by, and you can't really see, sorry about this. So these are areas of expertise reported by our members in their member profiles. And this is a percentage chart. It's based on the people who respond. All of these charts that you're seeing are based on the responses that we have gotten. So 1,000 or so members, a little over 1,000 responded and identified their main areas of interest and expertise. And so you can see that grief and loss and mindfulness meditation lead the pack. And it's followed by the issues that you see, men's issues, group spiritual direction, elderly and dying, women's issues, etc. And so on down the line. So those are specialty areas, I guess, that our members offer. Our demographic representation. And I'm sorry, I can't show these full screen, but it basically shows that our spiritual and religious demographics skew as follows. We have Christians, which is a very loose grouping of probably about 25 or 26 different and some quite dissimilar denominations that are lumped in there together. The spiritual but not religious, these are people who identified in that category. We have about 15% who don't identify at all. Interfaith, other, which is a combination of lots of smaller categories. Judaism at 1.39%, spiritual independence at 1.39%, and now Buddhists at 1.29%, which when I first joined was didn't even register as a bleep on the radar. So that's a nice change. So those are our member demographics, and hold your questions. You can ask me, and I can try to post these charts again. If you have questions on any specifics around them. Financial results are as follows. Total revenues for this year, these are projected revenues, are about $1.4 million US. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, and so we won't have final numbers until about mid-July, but this is where we are tracking with net ordinary income of about $150,000 US. This is a record year for SDI, the biggest in our history, in our 30-year history, and reflects in particular a very strong interest in our conference in Santa Fe, which had to be postponed by a year, but 2/3 of the people who had registered, well over 1,000 people registered for that conference, decided to transfer their registrations to next year's conference in April of next year. And so this revenue number reflects that. We have by buckets, the biggest category of revenues for SDI is memberships, and that's just a little over $502,000, which represents an 8% increase year to year from the preceding fiscal year. The next category is events. And this is our annual conference in Santa Fe this year. So this is retained revenue. It is also workshops. We do a number of workshops on spiritual direction supervision. There was a storytelling workshop. We had some events in Australia. We had some events here in Seattle as well. And this bucket encompasses all of those, although the bulk of these revenues that you see here are the Santa Fe conference of retained revenue from the conference that was supposed to have happened 2 months ago. Journeys and pilgrimages are journeys to Iona, planned journeys to a number of other locations, but in the last year, it's principally Iona, and a couple of others. And so this represents a 31% increase from the preceding fiscal year. It's our third largest category. We have publications, which is our various our Presence Journal, Connections. There is also Listen and Discover, which is our monthly newsletter. And that's revenue that's tied mostly to presence. I see that there's one category that that isn't listed here for some reason, but it's basically our online offerings. And online offerings were particularly strong this last fiscal year at $180,000, and that is a 70% revenue growth from the preceding year. So a lot of that is actually growth that we experienced in the last 2 or 3 months, when many of you and many SDI members really were hunkering for more online offerings and joined them in our webinars and various other online offerings. And so that is probably the category that is experiencing the most rapid growth, is online offerings. And then finally, we have advertising, which is a $41,000 estimated category, in which we had a 7% decrease from the preceding year. So almost all of our categories, except for advertising, have grown year to year. And we have expenses of $1.25 million, and we have a large staff for the size of organization that we have, which reflects our aspiration to grow SDI. As we have in the last year, and to keep growing the promise of spiritual companionship and spiritual direction, and offering it to many more people worldwide. So, but as you can see, we are still doing a little better than break even with that. And of course, there's costs for programs and printing and overhead and rent and all sorts of other things. So that's our financial situation this year. It's an exceptionally strong year, as I mentioned, and I think reflects the great promise and the fulfillment of the great promise of spiritual direction and spiritual companionship. My last slide is the org chart, and this is my opportunity to thank the many people who work for SDI. And you can see there Kristen and Frederica and Heather and Stephen and Matt, Rory, Nick, Valerie, Judith, Desiree, Elizabeth, Reggie, and many others actually. And so we're covering lots of bases with all of these folks, and I'm really indebted to them for helping take this organization to the next level. So thank you to one and all. And that's it. That's basically the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. And again, I apologize for the difficulties in projecting this slideshow the way that I would have liked, but I seem to have some memory issues with my computer, I think. So with that said, I want to welcome Sean because I see he's now online. And Sean is our 8th council member. And Sean, did you want to introduce yourself briefly to everyone before we go to the Q&A?
Yes, I'm one of the how many percent Buddhists that helped get us onto the chart.
Yeah.
And I've been on the coordinating council for a little over 3 years. And I'm just really glad to serve. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Sean, and welcome. And so I'm triaging through the various questions, and we will basically, once this is done, I will hand this over. But I encourage everyone who's watching online to submit any questions that you have that you would like answered. And I'll start with a question from Nancy, who asks, how much of an impact do you think COVID-19 has had on our growth, on SDI's growth? And I would say that the impact in our online offerings, as I mentioned earlier, has been considerable. In April, May, and June, we have seen probably a doubling or almost tripling of our offerings and our revenues associated with online offerings, which I think reflects the need for community and the need to connect online in particular. So we've had very strong growth. I know that's a counterintuitive statement at SDI because of the COVID-19 on that front. Obviously, we were unable to hold a conference in Santa Fe, our 30th anniversary conference, and so had to refund a fair amount of money. So we had a downturn there. But I think the impact, at least online, has been quite positive. So there's 2 questions that I see about the tiered membership and the rationale behind it. So we have 4 tiers. It's I'll refer to them by their normal name. So student membership, a standard membership, an enhanced membership, and a premium membership. We haven't increased our membership prices at SDI for a good dozen years. And these new tiers reflect that we are holding our membership pricing as it has been over the last dozen years for students and standard memberships. But we are giving the opportunity for those who can afford to invest a little more to get a little more back. So they'll get more in-depth listings on our Find a Spiritual Companion guide, more words and videos. There's also a tier discount structure as the tiers go up, if you will, in terms of value. So that's a little bit about the rationale. We wanted to keep the pricing affordable for the many of you who have limited or more limited financial capabilities. And so this is basically a way to kind of split the difference and expand our opportunities. Here's a question on, is there a strategy or outreach effort plan on making SDI more international? And yes, I think that's been our intention now for many years. We haven't had the opportunity to really do that the way that I would like. I'm an internationalist by background, and so international is one of the things that really appealed to me when joining SDI as the ED 4 years ago. And it's something that in the year to come, particularly the next 2 or 3 years, I'd like to spend a lot more energy on. So the first part of that is we will have our website, and many of our online offerings will be in Spanish very soon, probably in the next month or so. And so that's the first part of it. We will be expanding in other languages. I think we also have the opportunity with online to much more easily increase our international reach than a traditional organization where you have to get on a plane and travel to various countries. This way, I think we'll be able to expand our international presence. So it's ongoing, and there's more to come. It is something that I and all of the council members speak about, how to implement this growth, and so a lot more to come there. Digital presence. So yes, we have new versions of digital presence. They are on PDF, obviously, and we have a kind of digital book option as well. And now we have a newer option, which is on HTML5, which should make digital presence very appealing and very easy to read and very easy to manage for all of our members. So digital presence has come to the fore, is coming to the fore, and it'll be included in our standard pricing as an option. And people who still want to get printed presence will have that option at the enhanced and premium levels. A question about SDI reserve accounts. So SDI does have some long-term reserves. And the question here is how it's doing in this period of market turmoil. And I guess the answer would be about as well as the market is doing, about as well as mutual funds are doing, I should say, which is not great at the moment. There's been a downturn in the value of those investments, but we're in it for the long haul, and those funds are being professionally managed. And so we have confidence that we'll do okay over the long term. Okay. So there's a question from Carl about big picture stuff. And what do I see as the future of the organization? How do we see SDIs inviting a seeping spiritual reflection in our society? I'd say a few things about that. I think spiritual companionship, spiritual direction is a modality that is always in great need, and that is especially in its greatest need during times of turmoil. And certainly I have experienced that. I think every member of this council has experienced that over the last 3 months, that people are really needing to connect. And they're really needing to connect on the fundamental issues that drive this organization, which is our connection to, call it a higher meaning, or the essence of the universe, or God, or Tao, or Brahman, or however you refer to that higher power, to that ground of all being. So I see the need for spiritual companionship and spiritual direction as greater in today's world than it has been in a long time, I would say. I don't want to say ever, but that it has been in a long time. And I see tremendous promise for the redemptive opportunities around spiritual direction and spiritual companionship. So let's see. Let's see a question here from Janine. Global response to Black Lives Matter may be a natural way to connect internationally, which is, yes, I acknowledge. And SDI is helping with deep listening, moving us all beyond our edge. Almost more of a statement than a question, but I agree. Let me take a look at the chat. What is the makeup of SDI racially and culturally? Is there a goal to reflect diversity in choices in future pilgrimages? So I would say our racial and ethnic makeup is more diverse than it has been, but it's still a long way from the kind of diversity that we would like to see at SDI. But we're making good progress. You know, this is a change that needs to be reflected, that reflects really the realities that we're all living into, not just in this nation, but in many nations around the world right now that are wrestling with systemic racism, with discrimination, with lack of opportunity, with socioeconomic disadvantages that the disadvantaged groups have experienced. So I think our organization has a lot of work to do in this area, and we've made some incremental change, and we certainly have the intention, or I have the intention, as well as the members of this council, to have much greater efforts in this area in the years to come. And I acknowledge here a statement of gratitude for the council statement on racism, on the events of the last few weeks in this country, but also worldwide. And let me see, I want to make sure that I get to all of the questions.
Here's one for you, Seifu.
Yeah.
Please share the rationale for changing the language to director/companion. For me, these are two different roles.
Right, and so we talk a little bit about this on our website, on our new website, which I hope you'll all be able to see if you haven't seen it already. For us, a spiritual directors international is at the heart of this organization. It's at the heart of its founding, but it's a term that is usually used within a few specific traditions, Christian denominations, Jewish denominations, and some modalities of Islam use spiritual director. I've also seen it used by certain Hindu groups who refer to spiritual direction. But outside of those, spiritual direction as terminology is not the preferred terminology. And so we came up with spiritual companionship to reflect more accurately how people describe themselves. And those, I'm a Zen priest, for instance, and I'd say that the modality that I offer is that of a spiritual companion. So it's a little broader, spiritual companion. It's a little more inviting, but they do have many things in common. And we've spoken a lot about the things that they have in common, things like deep listening and contemplative immersion and lifelong learning and accountability to our communities, accountability to supervisors, discernment, and so on. And these are all indicated on our website, indicated in many of our publications. We speak about them at great length. So I see them as two, in many senses, interchangeable terms. You just reflect different starting points, but the modality and what's associated with it is very similar.
How are you considering how to cultivate actively regional SDI groups? In my area, it has languished with communication erratic.
Yeah, so we're a small organization and we do as much as we can. And we've been focusing on, we had this new website relaunch. We had to do a lot of refreshing of our own internal operational practices. And so in the last couple of years, the last 2 or 3 years, we spent a lot of energy doing that. We are mindful of the need for local community engagements. And our director of content and communities, Stephen Crandell, is actually taking the lead on that. And we have an emerging group of communities around this nation, in Canada, and in Australia in particular. And so those are growing. We probably have about 15 to 20 or so of those communities in various stages of development. And we expect that number to grow in the next year and then the years to come, particularly as we have more resources to apply to supporting those communities as they emerge. and I want to make sure I get to all the questions, but how do you find a regional group? So the person to contact for that would be Stephen Crandall, as I mentioned, stevenc@sdiworld.org. If you send him an email, I'm sure he would love to respond. So being somewhat mindful of the time here, and unless I see two people have raised their hands here, I want to make sure that if there was any questions that I get to them. Okay. All right. So I think that's probably it for me. I want to thank all of you for your questions and for this opportunity to have a dialogue with you. Normally we'd be doing this at the conference and I'd be hearing everybody's voices and it'd be a little more dynamic. It's a little harder to do with this technology, but I'm still grateful to you for your questions. And of course, we're happy to answer your questions as we go along. And you can always send them to us at the office. office@sdiworld.org is a good one to send questions you might have about SDI as an organization or anything that I've raised in this presentation today. So thank you all for that. And with that said, I am going to turn it over to Cynthia, who is going to share some thoughts. So thanks again to all of you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm noticing on the Q&A, there's a question that says, can Cynthia speak to the issues we have about race and her sense of cutting edges? Can whoever sent that just give me a little bit more information, and then I'll be happy to speak to it. So I'm really grateful to be here to represent the Coordinating Council. This is my 4th year. My first 3-year term as the chairperson. So I'm really excited to work with this group and Safe Group. And what we are trying to do is, in our statement, we talked about living into being an inclusive global learning community that advocates for and celebrates the service of spiritual accompaniment. And one of the things that I am very mindful of as a adult learning director at a large Catholic parish, and I'm the director of a spiritual direction certificate program at a Catholic women's university. And I have a private practice mainly with clergy. I'm mindful that one of the things we talk the most about now is how do we sit with people who are themselves doing so much learning about what it means to be present to themselves and to another. How do they sit in that liminal space of what has been, what is now, and what is yet to be, not only for themselves, but how do they journey with others into those questions of, I don't know. So one of the things that I'm mindful of is with COVID-19 and the issues where the laser focus we're having on justice issues at this point, particularly racial injustice, is that we focus on one of the main things to do is to do no harm. And so that one of the ways I approach it, and we've talked about this in our council, because every time we meet as a group, we do a check-in and we talk about what is going on with us and how we are living into these challenging times. And so I think of asking myself, and for us to ask ourselves the same questions that we ask people when we sit with them, when we accompany them, is how are you taking care of your physical needs? Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Are you getting exercise? Are you being out in nature? What do you need to do for your physical health? Because that's one of our first indicators that something is not balanced. And right now, our mind is on overload. So what do we need to do to help calm our entire system down? How are you tending to your spiritual needs? Is that reading? Is that being in nature? Is that prayer? Is that music? What is it that feeds you and sustains you during these challenging times? And when you're sitting in a space of, I don't know. And how are you educating yourself about racial injustice and about injustice of all kinds? The intersectionality between injustice that goes on for our LGBTQ, our people of color, for our socioeconomic, for all of those environmental, for all of those issues where justice needs to occur. How are you educating yourself? And then how are you working with others to help educate themselves? And how are you being called to serve with hope, with commitment, with a sense of balance, with a sense of looking at this for the long term and understanding that there are times when you will need to step out, and when you do that, someone else will step in, and to think of I spent a lot of time talking to people, particularly clergy, about the guilt that they feel that they are not out in the streets protesting, yet they are sitting with people who are. And we spend a lot of time talking about the activists and the contemplative and how you actually have both parts of those within you. And so how do we move gracefully between those? And how are you being called to serve from one focus to the other at individual times, at different times, and what's that look like for you? And when you feel overwhelmed as you answer these questions, and you will, remember to breathe. One of the things that I'm here in Minneapolis and very mindful each day of what has occurred and how it's affecting us. And one of the things that George said as he was dying is, I can't breathe. And so for me, that's a clarion call to remember that even in those spaces when in times when we don't feel that we have breath to continue, we do. And so to remember to breathe. So if I could get back to that question, Seifu, can you kind of see if we have any more? It was on the Q&A. And see if you can find that for me. You know, one of the things that I'm mindful of, and we talk about this as a council too, is that each one of us come with our own focus on the council based on our social location, based on what work we do, based on what we feel called to do, based on those we serve. And so one of the great things about this council is that we are enriched by each other because we get the opportunity to see a different lens of spiritual direction, spiritual companionship. So I'm very mindful that you are all out there doing this incredible work and serving others. And you know, we're really deeply sorry that we are not at the conference and have the opportunity to share with each other what we are doing. So what do you have, Seifu, for me?
So I think this is the follow-on that we were looking for. It's the question is basically, are we deepening? Is SDI deepening its work and identity as an anti-racist community?
Yeah. So the focus of being anti-racist is it's not just enough to say, I'm not a racist, but to be proactive, to put systemic things in place to ensure that we are looking and being mindful of any systemic racism that will occur, can occur. And so one of the important things about that is to make sure you understand what racism is, that you know that race is a social construct, that you do your own work in terms of looking at the history from slavery to now and what has happened, and to be able to notice what your own biases and prejudices are, and to be, you know, in spiritual direction, we're always asking people to be self-aware, and we are called to be self-aware. That's why we have our own director and our own supervisor, is because we are to do our own work. So part of being an anti-racist is acknowledging the work that you have to do and to do your work. You know, that do no harm for me is very important, because it's not enough to say, I just didn't know. You need to be mindful of doing your own work. So that's what that means. I'm not sure, was there anything else? Any questions, any other questions for me?
No, I don't think so, but I am curious if you would share your thoughts, Cynthia, about what it is specifically about spiritual direction, spiritual companionship that is so powerful in moments like these.
Well, there's something about being present to another person. And I always describe spiritual direction for me and to other people about my experience. So I go to see my spiritual director, I'm driving, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. I get there and she reads something and I talk about something else because she's totally tweaked something in me because she knows me so well and we're off to the races. And it is this, she's a witness for me. She knows my story, she knows my struggles, she gently confronts me, she is present to me, she has no agenda. And not having an agenda is really important because it allows her to hear what I have to say. She's really listening with the ear of her heart. And so I think that as companions during these challenging times, that's what we're being called to do, to be a witness to the injustices that may not be occurring to us, and to be present physically and to listen with the ear of the heart to those we sit with, who share their sacred stories with us that may be something we totally do not recognize, yet we validate the truth of their experience.
Thank you, Cynthia. That's beautifully said. Very good. Well, unless there's any other questions, I think we are ready to move on to Wendy. And Cynthia, did you want to share some words about?
Yeah. So I came onto the council when Wendy was here on the council. And I am so sad that you're leaving because it's going to be a very different council without you not being here. I have learned a lot from you. You know, one of the things I was saying is that, you know, I've learned a lot about Jewish spiritual direction. I've learned a lot about your traditions. And we're a group that's pretty honest and open with each other. And so that's been very helpful to see the sacred through your eyes, which always broadens my view of the sacred. So I will miss you, dear friend. And I am deeply appreciative of all you have done to serve on this council.
And I would like to join and from my perspective and also from the staff's perspective to say a big thank you to Wendy. You know, I've been on this council. I'm coming up on finishing my 4th year, and Wendy was on the council that hired me. And she and I have covered lots of ground in the last 4 years together. And I can say that she is one of the most passionate and committed, but also contemplative and reflective and introspective. And so she really kind of covers lots of different bases beautifully. Also immensely compassionate, kind person. And so it's a lot of mixed feelings. You know, 6 years is a long time at SDI, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about those years from Wendy now. But Wendy, a big thank you from me for everything you've done for me and for this organization, and we're eternally grateful. So with that said, Wendy, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I'm Wendy Bernstein-Lash. I'm a cisgendered Jewish woman, and I use the pronouns she and her. I'm speaking today to you from Redwood City, California, which is on the historical land of the Lamshan tribelet of the Ramaytush people who are part of the Ohlone Costanoan language group, and I honor them and their ancestry here. It has been an honor to serve on the Coordinating Council. It's been a lot of fun too, but it's been an honor to serve on the Coordinating Council of SDI for the past 6 years. The Coordinating Council provides governance for SDI and the Executive Director and helps strategically shape it. For me, being an SDI member and being on the council has also helped shape me as a spiritual director and as a person. I joined SDI as a student member when I was in the beginning of my training to become a spiritual director. And I went to my first conference after that. It was a pretty powerful experience. At that conference, I found a place where I could talk to others about my spirituality and my spiritual experiences in ways that were not yet available in my Jewish circles and beyond my training cohort and my teachers. Over time, I offered workshops at the SDA conferences actually, and participated in committees and developed programming for the Leadership Institute and content for the website. And I was very honored to be selected to be part of the Coordinating Council 6 years ago. I have grown and I continue to grow as a spiritual director because of my active participation in SDI. And I have developed lifelong friendships with colleagues, all of those that you see here in the Coordinating Council, Seifu, and whose experience and wisdom I treasure. And although SDI was the initial place that I could finally talk openly about my spirituality, until recently, I didn't feel like I could fully be myself here. When I joined SDI, it was mostly a Christian organization that welcomed and invited me as a Jew. But being welcomed isn't the same as being truly part of the culture. 4.5 years ago, I think I got the numbers right, Seifu. I was fortunate to be part of the Coordinating Council that hired Reverend Seifu as our new executive director, knowing that he could help fulfill a vision of an SDI that was truly inclusive and even more vibrant because of that inclusivity. Today, 18 years after first becoming a member, I'm proud to have helped be part of making SDI an organization that is achieving its vision on so many levels. A thriving network of practice that is inclusive and welcoming to people of all genders, races, traditions, and faiths, and to those who are spiritual but not religious. We still have much more to do to make everyone truly feel welcome here. But at this particular time, it's also important to take a moment to reflect on and acknowledge the distance that we at SDI have come so far. So today, I know many others also feel that we can now bring all parts of ourselves here. And so I want to invite us in SDI fashion to take a pause, to reflect and acknowledge that growth and how it may have impacted you. So please just take a moment. Thank you. Growth is exciting and beautiful, and there are also costs that come with it. SDI has had and still has its growing pains. Today, I want to name 2. SDI needs to continually hold that tension that exists in honoring the Christian contemplative roots of our organization while we continue to explore and examine new horizons and what's emerging as the practice of spiritual companionship meets today's spiritual needs. SDI also needs to be grounded in who we are and clear about who we aren't. While spiritual directors support the growth and development of spiritual seekers, SDI's core mission is to support the development of the profession of spiritual companionship and the growth of spiritual guides. There were moments where it was challenging to be on the Coordinating Council navigating this new growth. We had a board meeting yesterday. It's still here. I joke, but only partly, that arguing, questioning, and even complaining are a well-honed Jewish spiritual practice. And at least I know it's at least true for me. Maybe that's because the Talmud, which is one of Judaism's sacred texts, is a collection of conversations of rabbis from different eras and different schools of thought in dialogue and disagreement around questions of Jewish life and how we act and relate to other humans. The Talmud, which many Jews don't even explore, is framed around questions that my ancestors were exploring. It weaves historical references from the Hebrew Bible with opinions of past leaders and later interpretations. It preserves the opinions and contributions of many voices over centuries, focusing on the outcome of an answer to a question more and more on the richness of the discussion that continued over many generations. I want to show you a picture of it because it's so unique. So hang on just a second. So this is not colored, but can everybody see that? My fellow coordinating council members, raise your hands if you can see. Okay, great, it's up. So this is what a page of Talmud looks like. You have some primary text here with a question in it. You have a major commentator from one era, and you have other commentaries from rabbis that are hundreds and hundreds of years later. It's hard to enter into, but it's pretty amazing. And the reason that I wanted to share it, it's laid out like the rabbis were sitting around a table discussing, very much like our conversations on the coordinating council. And to study Talmud is to join together into a 1,000-year-old process of discernment, how to be a human being and how to practice Judaism. I didn't realize it at the time, but as I started reflecting on my time in the council, I now see that our council meetings made me feel a little like being inside of a modern day version of the Talmud. The council has, by its intention, members from different religious and faith traditions with backgrounds bringing different variety of voices, experiences, and orientations. We sat around the table when we could be together or in Zoom squares on a screen, working through challenging decisions, raising questions, and holding the tension of the pull towards new directions while honoring the historical roots of SDI and spiritual direction. We needed to allow the time to discern together how best to navigate the tension inherent in SDI's growth and evolution. Trusting in the process and our experience with discernment ultimately brought us to more clarity and how to move forward in ways that would honor both old and new. These discussions always led us to a shared wisdom that was deeper for everyone. And my time on the council included a lot of hard work, and it was also incredibly sacred. And as I leave, what I know will stay with me the most were these amazing sacred discussions. We explored, questioned, listened, and discerned together. We shared and learned more deeply, as Cynthia said, about each other's traditions. We shared spiritual practices, experiences, and wisdom. I thank the continuing council members in advance and the new incoming members for continuing to shepherd SDI in this sacred way on its journey of how best to listen to and respond to what's emerging in the field of spiritual companionship as we expand our view of the field and our understanding of what spiritual direction is today. And this is an important moment right now, a time of great upheaval. The Talmud was Jews' response to the upheaval of its time. The temple, the center of our religious expression, had been destroyed. Jews were in a diaspora without a homeland and a central place of coming together. And Judaism was really crashing. Our world is in a new crash. Our traditional religious institutions and practices aren't speaking to the majority of people. Old destructive patterns of patriarchy, white privilege, racism, and economic injustice of people of color are starting to crumble, giving way to what I hope and many hope is a great turning, a needed course correction. And while turning is wonderful, other crashes that come with it are not as welcome. Breakdowns in our health, with the pandemic, breakdowns in our healthcare, economic instability, and the challenge of climate change and our planet's very existence. Right now, the world is being called to listen in a way to unlock different ways of knowing and enable new responses. As spiritual guides, we are trained to listen. Since I came on the council 6 years ago, we've been wrestling with and trying to discern how best to respond to the question of what is the role of SDI and how can spiritual directors best support the social issues of our time? With the recent events of the past few weeks, the additional question I'm holding is, how can spiritual directors and SDI best help others to listen? In that vein, I want to share with you a way of ritualizing deep listening that I learned on the first night of my first training residency in the first group spiritual direction. Rabbi Rami Shapiro used it, and to date, I've only seen it in Jewish spaces. I use it all the time with Jewish groups, and I want to share it with you today as a parting gift. So let me see if I can screen share again. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that. There we go. I wasn't even at Microsoft and I can't figure out how to do this. So hang on. That's not what I want to share. So hang on. There it is. Okay. All righty. I hope you all can see this. Thumbs up from somebody on the council. Okay, great. So Rami taught that when we as speaker felt complete with what we had shared, we would say Debarti, which in Hebrew means I have spoken. Each witness then would respond to the speaker, Shamati, which means I have heard. As spiritual guides, we know how to make time for silence and pauses that can be necessary for speech to emerge from a deeper place. As spiritual companions, we know how to listen deeply and allow our simple presence to affirm what has emerged into words in another without needing to comment on it. I've found Debarti and Shamati in groups helps others honor and signal to one another their participation in that deep listening. So even though I can't hear you, I invite you to try it with me. Let yourself say the words. So you can say Debarti. That means I have spoken. And the response is Shamati. That means I have heard. Okay. In closing, I want to say that I'm excited to see what new ways will emerge for spiritual companions to bring the healing power of deep listening to our world that needs it now more than ever. I'm excited to see what will unfold for me. How will I be called in different ways to support SDI and the ministry and profession of spiritual guidance? What will be the next invitation for me to respond to spiritual challenges and needs of our time? Originally, I was going to deliver this farewell at the conference in Santa Fe. I imagined what it would be like to lead over 1,000 spiritual companions singing together in the ballroom while I looked at all of your faces. Today, we won't be able to hear the wonderful chorus we could create with our voices, or be in each other's presence, or even see one another. Nonetheless, I hope we can all feel our connection to one another and this wonderful work that we do. I invite you to imagine the faces of friends and colleagues you have met through SDI as you chant along with me. The chant that I want to close our time with today is by the duo Mamoose. And let me share it again. Okay. There it is. Thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, we're good. All right. The words speak to the questions I'm holding now, and I invite you, excuse me, to hold them with me. How can we as spiritual companions best help the fires of spirits yearning to be heard and empowered? How can we be the best allies with our communities of color and support the necessary seeds of change in our society and our world? How can we help bring deep listening to situations and conversations that will support every person to thrive? And how can spiritual companioning help cultivate awareness of the deep well that connects us all? I'm going to do the chant twice through. I'm going to invite you to sing to your heart's content with me. I lead a monthly contemplative chanting service, and this is how we do it because we can't sing together over Zoom because of the buffering. But please feel free to sing along or listen and let it resonate inside of you. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. Debarti.
Shamanti. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy. We're all going to miss you on the council, but we are looking forward to seeing you in person in Santa Fe next year and in many other places in the midst of our community with your usual enthusiasm and ideas and passion. And what a wonderful contribution you've made to this organization. And so on behalf of everyone, thank you. And all the many thank yous that have come through the chat and through the and through other panels.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, with that said, I want to thank everyone who joined us today and to get a snapshot of where we are at SDI and where we are looking to go. We're very much a work in progress. We're constantly evolving and changing, and as you will have seen today, challenging ourselves and challenging each other and being challenged by all of you, by all of our members, and by the larger community of spiritual companions and spiritual directors worldwide. So we're grateful to all of you, and look forward to seeing you again very soon, either through this format or eventually, hopefully, in person. In the meantime, we want to wish everyone good health and fortitude and inspiration from all of us. And Cynthia, did you want to add any parting words as well?
Just thank you. As members of the council, we are definitely honored and privileged to serve you, our members. And please do not hesitate to contact us or SDI if you have any questions or concerns, and know that you are constantly in our heads and in our hearts. Thank you for being with us. Bye.